Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers. In this video, we've got a multi-tester review of the Under Armour Infinite Elite. Now this is Under Armour's new big cushion daily trainer. It's designed to eat all your daily miles and conquer long distances. Under Armour says this shoe is here to give every runner the utmost smoothed out ride with amplified energy return. Now it's here to rival the likes of the Nimbus, the New Balance 1080 V13, the Cloudeclipse, and all those everyday shoes. So does it live up to those claims? And can it rival the big hitting daily trainers? Well, watch on to find out. First up, those quick details then. Well, when it comes to stack height, the Infinite Elite has 36 mils in the heel and 28 mils in the forefoot for an 8 mil drop. So it's more On Cloudeclipse than it is Brooks Ghost Max or Nova Blast or Nimbus. It weighs in at 11.6 ounces or 329 grams in my UK men's 8.5 test size. Price-wise, it will set you back £145 in the UK, $160 in the US, so it's slightly pricier than the ASICS Nova Blast 4. And in the UK, it's a chunk cheaper than some rivals in this space, like the Nimbus 26, but in the US, it's much closer on price than all of those rivals. We're getting stiffed in the UK these days on shoes. Let's take a quick look at what's new with the design then. Starting with the midsole, well, you've got what looks like a huge stack of Hover Plus foam here, a sort of boost style beaded TPU. There's a notable rocker shaping to it, a lot of foam under the heel as well, and that foam wraps up quite high up the sides here, but there's a bucket sort of like seat for the foot, so the stack is actually lower than it might look. Under Armour says that the midsole is also tuned to be soft, light, plush and bouncy, in theory at least, but more on that later. Up top, you've got an IntelliKnit knitted upper. It's very thick, doesn't have that much flex in it. It's got a tighter knit where you need more structure, a looser perforated knit where you want a bit of breathability. Overall, the flex is okay. There's a bit of a stretch to the uppers, but it's not that stretchy. This isn't a flimsy knit that flops. It holds its shape to offer kind of wrapped security. Now the Infinite has big plush padded heel collars that narrow here into the heel cup. The tongue is also big and padded. It goes right down along the midfoot, that padding as well. There are fairly thick laces here and a good solid lacing structure. None of the flimsy sort of stitch eyelets that look like they're about to break. Inside the shoe, you've got a 3D molded sock liner that adds to that kind of overall comfort feel. There's also a TPU heel clip on the outside here to add heel security, a beveled heel to help smooth and stabilise those landings, and if you flip them over, you've got a really generous covering of what's called thin web rubber outsole here. Overall, this shoe looks solid and built to cope with high mileage as you'd want with a daily trainer like this. Fit then, and I ran in a UK 8.5, which is a US 9.5 in Under Armour world. I thought the fit was spot on. I got good heel hold from the big padded heel collars, reliable lockdown from that unfussy lacing, enough wiggle room and flex in the toe box from those knitted uppers, generally a good fit and a nice feel on the foot. And overall, I would recommend going true to size in these.
So I had no concerns at all with the fit of the Under Armour Infinite Elite. I think it's a very comfortable shoe in terms of the upper, got a good amount of room in the toe box, nice hold around the heel and midfoot, a lot of padding at the back of the shoe, but it's positioned in a way that it kind of hugs the Achilles, and I've had no problem with it rubbing my Achilles or irritating that in any way. So overall, I was very happy in my normal running shoe size in the shoe.
So fit for me overall has been very good in the Under Armour Infinite Elite. I've had mine in the UK size 8. That is typically the running shoe size that I go for. That is the running shoe size that has worked for me in other Under Armour shoes, so things like the Velocity Elite and the Velocity 3 more recently. What I would say is, you're being encompassed by quite a thick upper here. It's a knit upper, and what that does is create quite naturally a good amount of room and space up front in the toes, and then kind of wraps and supports in the kind of key places where you'd want it to when you're out running. So I would say there's quite a good amount of space up front and on the sides of your toes. I think, when you're running longer and you need that extra bit of room, then you do have that there. So I think from my point of view, that works really well. There's nothing too groundbreaking in terms of the lacing and the padding here. There's a good amount of padding in the tongue, and it sits quite nicely and snug on the top of your feet. And then you get quite a generous amount of padding here on the heel collar as well too. There's no internal heel kind of padding here, but it doesn't really need it based on the kind of design here, and I think it gives you enough in terms of that support there, but also that kind of level of comfort that you want over those longer runs. So yeah, for me, going UK size 8 has worked for me. I would say go true to size. I don't think there's any need to go half a size up or half a size down in the shoe, or bigger than that either. I think go true to size based on my testing.
In In testing, I've run north of 35 miles in the Infinite Elite. That includes some lower and slower miles, and I also did a couple of faster marathon training sessions too, as I prepare to run the Adidas Manchester Marathon in April. Most of that was on road, with a few off-road miles thrown in to test the stability of this big old shoe. Stepping comfort was good. The plushness of the shoe is apparent from the off. I wouldn't describe the feel as disappearing. There's a lot of shoe here. It's one of those. But these feel pretty natural on the foot when you first lace them up. They're pretty easy to sort of get comfortable. And once I got moving, I think the ride took a little while to bed in. On my first run in Barcelona, I found them a little stiff and clumpy. They were nowhere near the sort of immediate softness of something like a Nimbus 25 or the New Balance 1080 V13 or even the Ghost Max. And I felt like I was working hard to get as much return as I thought these shoes were going to give. But over subsequent runs, I found that they softened a little bit, and the more miles I ran in the shoe, the more I enjoyed the ride. So I've got this shoe down definitely as one that needs breaking in, but I don't think it's ever going to be a pillowy, soft, springy ride, even once you have done those break-in miles. And despite Under Armour's claims that this is a light shoe, it's not. It's also lacking the energy and bounce and liveliness, I think, of many of the kind of super-end daily trainers. I'd say it rides on the firmer, stiffer side with a more controlled and subtle energy to it. Some runners might actually enjoy that control, but for me, overall it feels like a lot of shoe on the foot. Perhaps sort of no more so than maybe a Nimbus, but that's the general vibe here. Big old shoe that's quite firm. I think that restricts its use case basically to slower, easier miles rather than anything sort of up-tempo. I did one interval session with 1 minute at mile pace and 1 minute recoveries, and they were a bit too weighty and laboured for that kind of effort. You can do it, that's for sure, but there are much better shoes for runs like that. On the plus side, there is a big wide platform here that makes for decent stability, and I think the rocker and the big platform are decently protective over longer miles. I think you can happily lace this up for a 90-minute long, slow plod. And again, it might not be the best at this, but it's still a capable shoe. It can do that kind of run. On the whole, for me, this was an okay shoe. If it was the only shoe I had to run in, if it was the only shoe available, I could definitely make it work for many of my runs, but I don't think it'd be the one that I'd reach for first over quite a few of the other daily trainers and easy shoes that are available, but more on that in the verdict.
So racked up around 55k in the Under Armour Elite over the past 5 or 6 days, really. I've been using it a lot over the course of last week, around 100k week, and I did, let's say, 55k of that week in this shoe, just picking up all the easy mileage in that week, which was a reasonably high mileage week for me, the highest I've done in a little while, and that's exactly what this shoe is for me. It is just a workhorse to pick up those easy miles when you are doing quite a lot of mileage and just need something nice and relaxing to pull on and plod your way through some slow miles. Like, I did do one short little section of my long run at a slightly higher pace in the shoe, but it does not feel good to move at pace in the shoe. It's certainly a hefty shoe and not one that's really built for speed at all, but you know, all that weight gives you a lot of protection underfoot in terms of this beaded foam you have here, the TPE beaded foam, which is reminiscent for me of the Ultra Boost and some of the early editions of the Ultra Boost. Like, it's not the softest foam in the world, but it is soft and comfortable, and then it's got a fair bit of rebound to it. Like, it's not a shoe, again, I think you can run fast and very comfortably, but does help you tick through those easy miles quite well, and I think it's going to be incredibly durable. Also softened up a fair bit after a couple of runs. First 2 runs in the shoe I thought it did feel very blocky and I wasn't really keen on it at all, but last 2 runs, including that long run I did in it, it softened up quite nicely, so it just has a little bit more give underfoot and gives you that slightly more plush and relaxing ride. So it is a shoe built for a pretty specific job for me, which is that workhorse shoe. And I do think to really get the benefit of it, you have to be doing probably even higher mileage than me, because even over the course of that 100 mile week, it does protect the legs well, but there are certainly comfortable shoes out there what I find would do just as good a job and have a slightly more dynamic ride, a slightly more exciting ride, an enjoyable ride for those easy runs. Because the Infinite Elite, it's okay, but it isn't like giving you a lot back underfoot. It's very much just that protective chunk of shoe that you have there. And, you know, it is comfortable, but it's a bit big for me, a bit heavy for me. And so all round, I wouldn't say like it's a shoe I'd reach for any great enjoyment. It's probably the kind of shoe that you'd grow to love over a long period, because it is a very solid workhorse that if you had it there in your rotation, just picking up loads and loads of easy miles, it would, you know, you'd come to grow quite a lot of affection for it. But it almost feels more that you've got to be a really high mileage runner to benefit from it, or someone who's almost, you know, like a big guy who's like muscle bound or something like that, and using this shoe as your, you know, occasional run shoe as part of some other kind of sports training. Like, it doesn't feel like one that would go in my rotation, just because I wouldn't need this much shoe and this much weight on the shoe for my easy runs, and I don't necessarily appreciate those factors, that extra weight that you have here. Although it's comfortable, I just think there are better foams out there these days. Like, TPU beaded foams, did like the Ultra Boost. I thought it was a good shoe, very durable. We're going to retain that level of responsiveness and bounce that they have for a long time. But I just think we've moved on a little bit in some of the materials on the market. I think you can get more comfortable supercritical foams or more exciting foams, and they make easy runs and long, slow runs just a little bit more enjoyable, I find. There are a lot of very good shoes in this category now, and while I think the Infinite Elite is fine at this job, it doesn't really feel like it's at the forefront of the kind of technology we're seeing in shoes even of this type these days. So you end up with a really bulky shoe, going to last forever, going to eat up those miles, but yeah, there are shoes that I'd rather have on for those miles. Also say that the wide design of the shoe, I think, makes it really quite stable naturally. I have no concerns about that kind of stuff moving even on light trails throughout some of the runs I did. So that's definitely a factor. Again, that all adds to that element of protection you're getting underfoot here, that increased stability from the wide base and the way you kind of sit in the foam a little bit. So even though it's not a stability shoe per se, I think it certainly falls into the category of a stable neutral shoe.
So into that run test, and I have done 31 miles in the Infinite Elite, so just under 50k in this shoe, and that's been a mixture of running time out in Barcelona for the launch, but also back home in less sunnier conditions and ultimately conditions where I'm going to be using this shoe more regularly. Now, in terms of the experience of running an Infinite Elite, what I would say is definitely, I would class it as a long run shoe, an easy run shoe. I think ultimately it's a little bit too heavy. It's just a bit too much in terms of the amount of cushioning that you're getting here to make it work from what tempo work. It's not as versatile as the UA kind of velocity kind of range from that point of view. But I don't think ultimately that's what it's designed for. It's designed for you put this on, you go, you run long, you log a lot of mileage, and it's going to keep you protected, comfortable, and keep you very controlled in that running time as well. Now, what I'd say in the first run that I did, I definitely did feel like it felt pretty firm. This Hover Plus midsole, which is kind of the upgrade of the Hover kind of midsole tech that Under Armour's used previously, is supposed to be springier, bouncier, offer better energy return. Now, it definitely felt on the firm side, and even just pressing into it when taking it out of the box, you can feel that firmness. It's almost kind of polystyrene in terms of the sensation of feeling it. Now, that first run, it was firm. It definitely softened up on runs after that. I do think that definitely helped in terms of the experience of running in this shoe. There is some bounce there, and it does help when you are out and you're running longer in this shoe. And the ride, there is a kind of gentle rocker ride there as well. The transitions are pretty good here as well too, pretty smooth, and it's definitely a very stable shoe. You've got that kind of wide kind of in general fit and upper, and that kind of knit upper kind of generally kind of creates that, but also you're getting this heel clip here, which definitely creates that kind of more stable feel, particularly at the back of the heels here. So when you drop down that hill, you know that you're getting something pretty controlled, and that's ultimately what I think you want for those kind of longer runs, those easier runs. You just want to be able to go out there. But ultimately, where I really wanted to see where it performed was on those longer runs, and that kind of longer kind of marathon training run, it felt pretty good, it felt solid. I didn't feel like it was an awkward shoe to run in. There was enough of a bounce to make it feel like a pleasant enough experience to be running in this shoe, and I definitely felt like it protected me. I felt like that outsole really protected me, and that midsole protected me as well too. And I said, there is some bounce there, so it doesn't make it feel like a nice enough experience to be out there. And then looking at the outsole of the shoe, and there's a good amount of rubber here on the Infinite Elite, particularly at the forefoot. There is some exposed areas going centrally through this outsole, but in terms of what you're getting at the heel, what you're getting at the forefoot, there's a lot of rubber here, and it's kind of more focused on the lateral sides of the shoe, I would say. But, no real problems in terms of gripping and traction, what you would expect. You're sticking to roads and pavements, maybe doing some lighter trail work, then this is going to be absolutely fine. I'm not seeing any terrible signs of wear yet on those kind of exposed areas of the outsole. So yeah, pretty solid overall in terms of my experience with the Infinite Elite. It is a long, easy run shoe. It is a midsole that definitely is a little bit on the firm side, but there is some bounce, there is some nice kind of smooth transitions there, and it is a very stable shoe to run in as well too, with an outsole that feels like it's built to handle a decent amount of mileage as well too.
So Under Armour has a habit of making shoes that are okay, they do a job, but they rarely break new ground or blow the competition away. I like the Under Armour Velocity Elite. It's a good example, of carbon racers, but it wasn't going to be the best racer going. UA shoes are sort of 7 out of 10 territory for me most of the time, and I'd say this is the same thing is true here with the Infinite Elite. They run okay, but they don't wow me. Now, I'm a fan of lighter, more compact shoes generally, so maybe I'm not the target market here, but overall, it's a bit heavy. It's not quite the energy and liveliness I think many runners now look for from an everyday shoe. However, it's a perfectly capable clip-along shoe. You can plod out low and slow miles in relative comfort, and if you want a big cushion shoe that offers protection and good stability, that's tuned slightly firmer than the likes of the Nimbus or the Ghost Max, then this might be one that you could look at. I can see heavier gym goers who do the odd occasional bit of running and cardio enjoying this kind of shoe. On the whole, there are shoes that I put ahead of this. The Saucony Ride 17 is one, offers the comfort, but it's lighter and more versatile. The New Balance 1080 V13 I think does the comfort thing much better, and so does the Brooks Ghost Max. Now, if Under Armour made this shoe $20 cheaper than all of those rivals, I think it'd make it much easier to recommend, and that's where I'd recommend that they go, make them more value. It's not a better shoe than much of the competition in this space. It's not necessarily worse either. And if you're a regular Nimbus Ride, New Balance 1080, Glycerin runner, there's not enough here really, I think, to make you want to switch. And I think that Under Armour need to make it better value to make it more competitive.
So my verdict is that I think the Under Armour Infinite Elite is a shoe built for a very specific job, and it does that job pretty well. It is a protective, comfortable, stable shoe for slow mileage, for big mileage, and I think it's going to be really durable. I think the price point's pretty good as well for this kind of shoe. I just not a kind of shoe that I think I would put in my rotation myself, and I just don't know if it's got that much appeal on a marketplace that's got loads and loads of very cushioned shoes that do the same job as this and have a little bit more life underfoot, or a little bit more comfortable and soft, or are a little bit more versatile. So lots of shoes out there that I'd probably pick ahead of it myself. I think there are some people who would go for this really if you are on very high mileage and just cranking out 100k of just easy running a week and with speed sessions as well, then maybe have a bit more use, because it's going to be, I think, really durable as well because of the beaded foam here. But something like the Puma Magnify Nitro 2 for me is a lighter, more comfortable, more enjoyable, more cushioned shoe, actually, more cushioning underfoot, that I prefer for those kind of easy runs as well. Actually, and even at my kind of mileage, which isn't massive, but is fairly big enough, I'm looking at 80 to 100k a week, I would use my easy runs. I'd be very happy in something like a mid-cushioned level of training, something like the Puma Velocity Nitro 3, the ASICS Nova Blast 4, which actually has a higher stack than this, but is a lot lighter again. So I think you can find shoes out there that have same kind of comfort but then have a lot more versatility and a similar price or lower, and I just think they're going to be more suitable for the majority of runners. I think this really is a shoe that hits a niche of that big workhorse comfort shoe, and I don't think that niche necessarily has to exist for lots of runners these days, because there are so many really incredible versatile shoes out there that have a lot of foam underfoot but are lighter and more sprightly and are more comfortable and less and easier to turn over on long runs because they are a bit lighter and all those other things. So I think this is a good shoe that does the job it's set out to do. I just don't think there's such a big need for that job for lots of runners these days. I think now the shoe technology has moved on to the point when you can just get a more versatile shoe that for the majority of runners will do those comfortable, easy runs really well, but then have a bit more about them for other stuff, and just in general are a bit lighter and a bit more sprightly and nimble than the Infinite Elite, which is just a bit of a tank. And even if you're looking for those big tanks, I think something like the Gel Kayano from ASICS, which is a stability shoe, still a fair bit lighter than this shoe, really stable, really comfortable, really protective for long runs, higher cushioning, and I think another shoe that does that job really well, probably a little bit better than the Infinite Elite.
So my verdict at Under Armour Infinite Elite is that this is a highly cushioned kind of daily trainer shoe that definitely veers more on those longer, slow, easy runs, logging a lot of mileage, but not necessarily wanting to have that versatility in a daily trainer shoe, because ultimately I just don't think it can deliver that or offers that really in abundance. Now, in terms of what you are getting here, you are getting an upper that is nice and comfortable, looks good, is supportive in the right places as well. So the midsole definitely isn't as exciting as some of the midsoles that you'll see in other daily trainer shoes that kind of have that kind of slower, kind of easy run slant, but there is a good amount of protection here. It's very stable. As I said, there's a kind of a nice wide base here, and there's enough of a rocker ride to make it feel like an enjoyable experience overall on those kind of longer runs as well. And that's matched with an outsole that definitely feels like it has got a lot of life in it as well too. What it comes down to is this a shoe that I'm going to pick over other shoes that I think are designed for the same types of runs? Daily trainer shoes that can work at those slower, easier paces. I'm not sure I would. I just don't think that the midsole has absolutely won me over. While there are aspects I like about the shoe, I think ultimately as a package, I think there are better packages in terms of other shoes that are out there. It's at £145. It's not massively expensive, but it also isn't cheap either. And what I think is maybe if it was a little bit cheaper, it would maybe be a bit more attractive in terms of an option. If you liked the Under Armour shoes, you're looking for a very good Under Armour shoe, love the look of them, wanted an improved experience from a kind of longer training shoe, then I think at a slightly cheaper price, I think it would be more appealing. But ultimately, when you look at that price tag, I think you could probably get things less than that would offer you a more versatile experience, but also still excel at those longer runs and leave you feeling like you're getting a more pleasurable experience from the ride and from an overall kind of weight balance as well in terms of that ride as well too. So I think ultimately for me, it's probably one of the better Under Armour shoes. It's left me with a better impression than the more recent Under Armour shoes I've used, so the UA Velocity 3, which I feel like is a bit of a misstep for Under Armour. This feels like this is a shoe that represents Under Armour going in the right direction. I still think it needs to do a little bit of work in terms of improving that midsole kind of experience, because I think there's aspects here that work really well, but I think it's just missing that last ingredient that really will put it up, the rest of the competition, make it worth paying that little bit more money for ultimately. So yeah, for me, I think it is a good shoe for those kind of long, easy runs, but ultimately there's a few things that count against it if you want that versatility from a daily trainer. And ultimately, I just think there are better options, more excitable options below this price point, but also maybe slightly above this, which I think is going to give you a nicer overall experience for the same types of runs that the Infinite Elite is best designed for.
So then there you have it. That has been our look at the brand new Under Armour Infinite Elite. We hope you found this useful. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you did. Subscribe as well if you fancy hearing about when new content arrives on the channel. If you're interested in good daily trainers, I'm popping 2 reviews to watch up on the channel just about now. Otherwise, thanks as ever for watching. We hope to see you again soon on the Run Tester sometime. And in the meantime, happy running, everyone.